Hey, friends, I'm your host, Dr. Elizabeth Ssemanda, the intuitive psychiatrist, and you're listening to Stepping into Soul Power. Friends, we are on the spiritual journey, and a lot of us have had various experiences with religion, and there's this association between spirituality and religion, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Our next guest is well versed in exploring that. He's a retired professor of education and became a disciple of Yogi Amrit Desai, and went on to lead meditation groups and provide spiritual teachings. Marty Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Glad to be here.
So everyone has a beginning. How did you get started on this path to helping others really connect with their spirit?
Yeah, I'll tell you briefly sort of how I got on my own path first. I was a new professor, a new husband, a new father, a new homeowner. And I would get up certain days and I felt like, what am I getting up for? Particularly Sundays, it seemed to be the main day. The other days I sort of had things programmed. But Sunday I would get up and it was like, why? What am I getting up for? And I knew something was missing, and I loosely used the word spiritual, but I didn't know what it meant. And then I met Yogi Desai, or actually didn't initially meet him. I heard him speak, and things just clicked.
Mm.
And I had the experience of feeling joy that wasn't prompted by any event. I knew that if I had a paper accepted or some special thing happened, I could feel happy temporarily. But this was joy unprompted, just joy. And continued to be in his presence. And that was the beginning of my spiritual path. And then I started leading meditation groups. And in those groups, I would give a talk each time on some aspect of spirituality in our daily lives. And that was going fine. But I had this sense that if I got myself out of the way, more powerful teachings would come through. And so I stopped doing any preparation for my talks, and I would just go in very often with a topic and just speak spontaneously. And it was amazing because the teachings were at a level that were beyond what I could have designed, what I could have created. And after this went on for a while and I was recording these, I felt these teachings needed to be shared more widely than just the people coming to the meditation group. So I started editing each talk into a chapter, and I created this book, Spirituality for Effective Living. And it's very practical, and that's the way I think about spirituality, as a very practical way of paying attention to what makes our lives rich, joyful, peaceful, loving.
I have so many questions.
Great.
What do you think makes our lives rich?
So each of us has a source within us of joy, love, enthusiasm, peace. And I like to say that those are not four different things that are inside of us. That's one thing that's inside of us with four different names. In other words, there's a quality. It's our essence that we can describe with all these words. And we usually aren't in touch with it because we've identified with our ego mind. And our ego mind has this idea that if we get life arranged just the right way, if we get all the things we want and avoid all the things we don't want, sometime in the future we will be happy. We will be okay. And of course, it never comes because life doesn't really care what our preferences are. We may control one or two factors occasionally, but we don't we don't get to control life. And so we are always we're stressing, we're anxious about getting everything right so we can be okay in the future, and we never are. And when
Mm.
we let go of that, when we come back to being present, when we let go of our identification with the ego mind, this natural source becomes available. And we start to realize we are the awareness. We're the person who's hearing all these thoughts.
Mm.
Most of our thoughts are not, we didn't choose to have these thoughts. When you say, I can't get this song out of my head, you're the one listening to the mind do this, right? You didn't choose to have this song playing on an endless loop in your head, right? So we're the one who's aware. And when we realize I'm the one who's aware, not well, I'm the thoughts, then we let go of this agenda of trying to control life so we'll be okay sometime in the future. And we just settle into feeling more and more joy, love, peace. It's not mystical. It's not, and I always say that it's different than religion because it requires no beliefs.
Hmm. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's just that, in fact, spirituality is about letting go of our beliefs. Our beliefs are limiting. If I believe that as I age, certain things are going to happen, that's a very limiting view. We
Yes.
don't know what's going to happen, right? If I believe that people don't value me or something like that, that's just a limiting belief. So spirituality is about letting go of those beliefs so that we can be fully present with what is instead of seeing things through the way we think they are. If I go out back and I look at a tree, and what I'm doing is I'm running through what I learned in biology about that tree, I'm not seeing the tree. I'm I'm involved in my thoughts about the tree. But if I can just be present with the tree, I get to experience it as it really is. So spirituality is not about, you don't have to accept a set of beliefs the way you do in most religions. And in fact, the process is about recognizing beliefs and letting them go so we can be present with what is.
Let's talk about that. In this world, in our society, people are so distracted. There's so much going on. How can they start to recognize beliefs, and what's the process for letting them go?
So thoughts and emotions are meant to come, be recognized, and pass. And sometimes we interfere with that process, but that's the normal process. So when we recognize that the mind is playing a thought that takes me away from what is, all I have to do is notice it. I don't fight with the mind. I don't try to use the mind to counter the mind. All I do is notice it. And if I want, I can say, thank you for sharing and let it go. And that's it. It's as simple as that. And the, the great benefit of that is every time I do that, I'm reinforcing the notion and I'm the awareness, not the thoughts.
So, are you starting to do this with meditation, or is this in everyday life? What are the practical ways that people can start to do this on their own?
Yeah. So meditation is a practice where we learn to do it. So it's the practice field where we hone the skills before we take it into the game. So people have misconceptions about meditation. They think it's just something you do to relax. It's
Yes.
fine if you want to do it to relax, but it's a very powerful practice in which we learn to witness and realize that we are the witness. And we can witness the breath, We can witness the thoughts that come. We can witness the feelings that come, and so on. So we build up this ability to witness and know ourselves as the witness so that, and that's the payoff. The payoff is not during meditation. That's just where we hone the skill. So that in our daily life, so that if I'm sitting there and I have this thought, I would be happier if my partner was more blank. Now, in the past, before I got into spirituality, I would be off and running with that thought. How do I get my partner to be more blank? Now I just notice it and realize that's just my mind talking and I'm fine, right? And it's this continual chattering of the mind about how I need things in order to be okay in the future. And I just let it pass. I just recognize I don't have to get involved with that thought. And it's not a problem that I had the thought. That's the mind does that. It's the nature of the mind. So I don't fight with it, don't create internal disturbance around it. I just let it pass. I don't get involved. Whereas in the past, I would have grabbed hold of it and said, yeah, that's what I need.
Well, so you develop a practice of really looking at the beliefs that you have and letting them go. What are the other things that you label as practical spiritual practice?
Yeah. So the overall notion is one of witnessing, and
Okay.
particularly of witnessing the ego mind's agenda about everything I have to get and everything I have to avoid that I'm constantly busy and stressed with if I buy into that. Right. So,
Yes.
in terms of specific practices within that, and this was what I had proposed to talk with you about today, is the most powerful one that I have ever been introduced to is something that I call, and I originally learned it from Mickey Singer, he calls releasing emotions. Now, every one of us, being human, we have powerful emotions, and many of those are uncomfortable or painful, right? We're all going to lose people in our lives. We're all going to have things that are sad, that we grieve. We're going to have things that make us angry. There are all kinds of uncomfortable and painful emotions that we're going to have. That's part of being human. Spirituality doesn't take that away. But what spirituality can do is teach us, spiritual teachings can teach us a better way to work with those feelings. So imagine somebody who loses a spouse. Of course, it's painful. Of course, they're grieving. 5 years later, they still can't go into the bedroom that they shared with their spouse. They can't get rid of their things. They still dissolve into tears in response to all kinds of things. By their own description, they can't, they're having trouble leading a normal life.
Yeah.
This is what we call suffering. Pain is natural, suffering is not required. And so by knowing how to work with the painful feeling, we don't have to buy into suffering. So what does that mean? Well, most people only know two different ways to deal with emotions: suppressing the emotions. I'm not angry, right? We just stuff it. We don't
Yep.
experience it.
Yeah.
And that's very popular. And in fact, culturally, we reinforce that. So somebody loses
Yeah.
somebody they love. And what's the advice they're given? Keep busy, distract yourself. What is
Yeah.
that? It's suppression, right? Try not to feel it.
Yeah.
The other way we know to deal with emotions is to express the feelings. And so we yell when we're mad, we pound the pillow when we're frustrated. We just sort of get it out. We just dump the energy. And neither of those things has a positive effect on us going forward. In fact, it can have negative effects. So when we don't release the feelings, we tend to store some aspect of the feeling in our bodies and in our emotional body, if you will, and we create energy blocks. So I'm sure everybody has noticed sometimes somebody will say something that to the people around you seems completely innocent, and you react in anger, right? You explode. What is that? That's the stored emotion being hit. That energy block where you stored it is being hit by this trigger. It's not the fault of the trigger. It's that you have this stored thing that gets hit. It's like if you have a sore finger, life is going to hit that sore finger. It's inevitable. Things happen that hit your sore finger, not because life is trying to, but because you have this vulnerability. When we have stored emotions, they get triggered and we react disproportionately. And in order to have those energy blocks, we invest energy to try to keep it away from our awareness. We tie up energy. And so as we age, we tend to have less and less energy because more and more of it is tied up in our energy blocks. And I think the majority of what we think is normal for aging is actually that we are accumulating energy blocks and it's not required and it can be changed at any point. So how do we change it?
Interesting.
How do we change it? That's the third way of dealing with emotions that most of us were never taught. And that's releasing emotions. So what
Can
do I
I,
do? Go ahead.
because you said something, you talked about, so there are two things typically that people do. So suppressing, that I get. I see that all the time in psychiatry. But then you said expressing. And so there are treatments within the realm of psychiatry, like somatic therapy, where people do breath work or certain movements to help release. I guess you could say that energy is being moved. So I guess I want you to clarify expressing emotion versus releasing emotion.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, I haven't said what releasing is, so that'll be part of it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
in expressing emotion, we're just trying to dump the acute energy. So let's say somebody says something and you react angrily. The trigger, whatever that was, hit something that was stored in you and you had this big reaction. So in expressing, you're just trying to dump this triggered energy.
Okay. Okay. So
What
in
happens is, let's say it's your partner. A week later, the partner does something similar. And not only do you react, you maybe react even a little stronger. So you've just dumped that energy temporarily. But what you're doing is you're kind of setting yourself up to continue to react in the same way. Very often it becomes more frequent or more intense. So that's why we need this third way, which I haven't told you about yet. Ready?
okay. Yeah, yeah, I'm listening. I'm listening.
Okay. So
Okay.
the third way is to witness the emotion and allow it to complete. Okay. In psychiatry and psychology, probably come across the notion of gestalt, right? Complete the gestalt. So basically what that means is, and the way I've learned it and honed it and modified it a little for myself is you focus on the experience in the body. So let's say I lost somebody I love, and what I feel is this pain in my heart, right? So while it's acutely happening, I sit quietly or I lie on my back. I open my chest, which is usually the opposite of what you want to do. You usually want to curl up in a ball and protect your chest. You open your chest and you just watch that the physical experience of the emotion in your body. And it may intensify, it may move to another location, it may open a second front, it may do all kinds of things. You're not trying to do anything with it, you're just being present with it, you're witnessing it, and you're allowing it to complete. You're allowing that acute experience to finish. You're not trying to get rid of it. You're allowing it to finish. You understand that it has its own intelligence. It knows what it has to do to complete, and you're just present with it. That is releasing it. And it sounds simple, but it's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And it has several incredible benefits. Number one is you're not just releasing the energy that's up. Each time you do that, you're releasing part or all of the block that got hit. So what we really want is for the block to be gone, so we don't keep having to replay this. And it may, in acute things, in intense emotions like grief, it's not a one-time deal, but it's a commitment to each time a new wave comes, you do this practice of opening the chest and allowing it to complete. The other thing it does is you become less and less afraid of your feelings. People are so afraid of their feelings. Grief, for example, people feel like if they totally experience their grief, they'll go under and never come back up. And it's just not true. People think that grief is constant. It's not. It comes in waves, and you just need to practice it each time the wave comes. And then you realize, I can do this. And the result is that you become more open. You have more of your energy available. And so you have more capacity for joy and love. Two marriages that ended the same way with my wife leaving me. And the first was before I began practicing any spirituality. The second was right after I learned about it. The differences were enormous. And people who knew me came up to me afterwards and said, "You seem different. You seem softer. You seem more open." But that's not what most people experience when they experience grief. Most people experience being more closed down. They feel like, I never want to be hurt like this again. And so if we have a way to work with our emotions that actually improves our life by making us more open, by restoring our energy, this is a huge gift, as opposed to most people. It's like each time they have a very powerful negative emotion, they've lost some of their aliveness.
Yeah. When I think back to my clinical practice, like people will describe it like that. There's a part of themselves that they feel like they lose. But I love what you've said about meeting emotions head on and being the master of your experience. You said that after two different marriages, that there were two different experiences. There was an enormous difference. How were you implementing this within your life?
So that's a very interesting question. A few minutes before we were scheduled to meet, I had the expedited passport renewal, which was supposed to allow me to go on my trip on Thursday, tell me that they were going to send my passport on Friday. And of course, I had a big reaction to that. So I was sitting there practicing this just a couple minutes before I met with you. We can do this every time we have a small or large experience particularly uncomfortable emotion. And so the more we can remember and be willing to do it, the more powerful this practice becomes. I find that I actually remember better the stronger my reaction. When somebody says something just a little bit annoying, sometimes I just stuff it. But on the major stuff, it's become part of my life that I stop and I do the practice. I sit there, I open my chest, I allow that feeling to just do what it needs to do, wherever it is, and allow it to complete. And I've added something to the practice, which is a statement of gratitude. Because, and I can do that very honestly, it's not just lip service, because I know how powerful and beneficial this process is, I can actually say, thank you for the opportunity to go through this. And the reason I do that is because there's always a chance with uncomfortable emotions that I'm going to have a little bit of a resistance. But I can't resist and express gratitude at the same time. So it's like it preempts any resistance that I would have.
I love that. I love that. For our listeners, if there's one thing that you would like for them to take away from what you've learned over the years, what would you say that it is?
Do I get two?
Yes,
Okay.
of course.
Okay. So I'd say one is sort of an overview of the paradigm shift that's possible, which is most of us are identified with and driven by the ego mind, which is always saying you need to get all these things on this list and you need to avoid all these things on this list. And then we wonder why we're stressed, why we're anxious. And there's the possibility of learning to hear that voice and not get involved in it and just get ourselves off the treadmill that the ego mind continually puts us on. That's the overall path. Okay. And then the specific would be this process of releasing emotions. You know, I think if you go to my Substack, there's an article that describes this process. There's also an article where I talk about our biggest energy drain is self-imposed in terms of the way we deal with emotions. And then in my book, there's a chapter on releasing emotions, on dealing with uncomfortable emotions. So if people want to follow up, I know it's a lot to take in just from listening to one podcast. If people want to follow up by reading about it, those are two sources. But to me, I say every time it's written in the book, I think it's written on the Substack, this is the practice that has been the biggest gift for me. And most of us live afraid of our emotions. You know, we think we're afraid of losing our job. We're not afraid of losing our job. We're afraid of how we're going to feel if we lose our job, right? If we got fired and we're ecstatically happy, that would be okay, right? So we're ultimately afraid of our own emotions. And when we learn to work with these emotions in a way that's powerful, that's growthful, that's freeing, it's just an incredible transformation. It's like the worst thing becomes a good thing. Now, nobody signs
Yes.
up for grief or a grief triggering experience. Nobody signs up to be made angry, but it's going to happen. So why not learn to work with it in a really positive way?
Thank you. Thank you for this. It's been needed to be said. I know that our audience is going to want to get in contact with you. What's the best way for them to do it?
I think the best way is through my Substack. It's martysimon.substack.com. And yeah, you can send me a direct message through Substack. You can see all my content. I put out a weekly article. So I've been doing that since mid-November. So there are a lot of articles. they're tied together by some similar themes. There's one on anxiety. There's one on stress. There's one on midlife crisis. There are all kinds of material, and it's a way to get in touch with me. And I'm on it daily, so I respond to people and love to hear from people.
Simon, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me, Elizabeth. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
If you haven't heard it yet today, I appreciate you. The soul in me honors the soul in you. If you'd like to see more episodes like this, please subscribe or click here. And friends, if this spoke to you, leave a comment below. We would love to hear from you.